started when I started my process of putting together the documentary and trying to wrap my head around the aspects of his personal life and his professional life, that the gaps that I didn't necessarily fully understand. Um, the fact that he supported the notion of economic union with the United States was always something that kind of fascinated me and interested me, especially because of the fact that he became such a fiercely proud representative of Canada, but also the Newfoundland and Labrador aspect of who he was as well. But the more I learned about it and the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. So in the documentary, I had an interview with John Crosbie, who was the lieutenant governor at the time, and I can still see the clip in my head. Like John Crosbie was talking about how he was answering my question to him about how did that all come to be and how did that happen, and he said, well, I think I would imagine my father probably asked him to do that. And then when I went and revisited his memoirs, it made even more sense to me that my grandfather at the time would have been a prominent voice. He would have been known as an articulate individual. He was watching the discussions around the possibility of Confederation and what to do with Newfoundland as a Newfoundlander in the press gallery in Ottawa, the very first. And he was aware of those sorts of things. He was aware of the intricacies. He was somebody who was a very thoughtful individual, and he weighed out all of the different sides of a decision before proceeding with taking action. And the financial argument existed in terms of economic union with the United States. And Ches Crosbie would have seen my grandfather as an articulate individual and a young person and somebody who could quite likely bring people to a side. And I imagine that through conversations and that sort of thing, like he was just sort of recruited for the process and kind of went along with it, no differently than you jump on a campaign at an election time. But I think once that option was removed, then I think at that point it was very clear where his position was, and the choice that we all ultimately made was, and that was for Confederation. The people who are on that side of Confederation, that who were part of the country of Newfoundland, and there's a very staunch pride connected to that part of their history, and it makes all the sense in the world to me, because just knowing what our cultural identity is today as Newfoundlanders and Labradorians, even now we're still very fiercely proud of it, and we extol the aspects of our cultural identity as a tourism product, and at home internally amongst ourselves, our cultural identity is a huge part of so much of what we do even today. As we construct new buildings, people are looking at it from a heritage perspective. As we diversify our industries, people are thinking about what industries define our people and our culture. And it's just so deeply rooted even today, even 75 years after Confederation has taken place, and I don't think that's ever going to change. The Newfoundland culture and the Newfoundland identity is an extremely valuable part of who we are as a people. It's not easy living where we have chosen to live, and we all still stay here, none all the same. And I think a huge part of that is because of that cultural identity. And it adds a degree of texture to ourselves and who we all believe we are as Newfoundlanders and Labradorians, and it speaks to what we have survived and the challenges that we have overcome as a society, as a group of people. And I think we're proud of that. We're proud of the innovation that Newfoundland and Labrador has created for ourselves as a province and for Canada as a country, and indeed internationally for the world. A lot of really amazing things have happened here. For me, honoring my grandfather and the body of work that he created and the contributions that he made has been a privilege, but also a bit of a personal project of mine. I am from a generation that is starting to move away from his generation. I started realizing as I was growing up that people wouldn't necessarily be aware of the things that he had accomplished or the changes that he had helped create in our province if something wasn't done to preserve them. Mainly, like I said, to preserve those aspects of our history and to create a touch point that would allow somebody to go back and sit down and watch the hour-long documentary and, you know, be able to not just learn about my grandfather, but like I said, also learn about our provincial history and our national history and talk about our cultural identity and frame up how politics was done at that particular time and, you know, talk about how things have changed. And those are my goals in creating the documentary. But I'm very proud that the documentary highlights things like the establishment of the 200-mile limit. So, you know, as a province with a fishing cultural identity, that industry was huge for us, and the 200-mile limit protection zone was absolutely key to that industry, and the agreement that established that zone, that protection, that agreement was signed on the kitchen table in our family home in Swift Current with my grandfather and Romeo LeBlanc, who was a minister at the time, and Alan McKechnie, who was also a minister at the time. And their three portfolios collaborated on creating the 200-mile limit, and the document was signed in the Jamieson family home in Swift Current. I just thought that was such a fascinating piece of our history that I didn't want that to be lost. So that's one of the stories that's in the documentary. The Confederation issue had been blowing hot and cold in Newfoundland for decades. Twice it had been rejected by Newfoundlanders, and at the time of the Commission's creation, Britain had dismissed the idea as impractical. At that time, Canada had also been less than enthusiastic. Yet, while odds against union remained long, throughout the Commission era the prospect never faded completely. Predictably, when Attlee revived discussion of Newfoundland's future, there were those in Britain, Canada, and Newfoundland who began anew to promote the Confederation option.